Bill Brooks is here with a great song called One Power, written by Daniel Nemad.
There's one power invisible, and you see it everywhere and every day. One power indescribable, and you speak of it with every word you say. Mysterious until you know the truth. As simple as the love inside of you. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, angel's wings or heaven's door. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? It's the power of the love in you and me. One power, one power, one power. We speak so many languages, have different clothing, different colors, different names. But different is only dangerous when we forget that in the heart we're all the same. We'll remember once we close our eyes to see that such differences were never meant to be. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, Hashem or heaven's door. It's Mohammed, it's your mind, it's your soul or it's your sign. It's the universe, it's music, Mother Earth or Father Time. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? Whatever name you give it, it's the very air we breathe. Oh, it's the power of the love in you and me. One power, one power, one power's what we are. One power, one power, one power. It's the moment of creation. It's an everlasting peace. It's the freedom of forgiveness. It's the sweetness of release. It's the joy of inspiration. It's the sunshine on your face. It's the birthright of all nations. It's the boundlessness of space. It's the beauty of a baby, the serenity of sleep. It's the anger we abandon for its love that's most deep. It's one power, one power. What we are is one power. It's the power of the love that lives forever in you and me. It's the power of the love in you and me. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill and Brian and Kent and Todd, and a special thank you to Leslie Godden, our guest drummer today. Whew, how do I follow that song? That song is perfect because it is what we are studying, what we are exploring. The one power, the love that is the true nature of God that flows through all of the world's religions. I have heard it said, I believe it was Charles Fillmore that said, religion points to the path. Spirituality is the path that leads us up the mountain. And all paths are right for the people who are on them. And all paths lead to the same destination. We may call it enlightenment. We may call it realization. We may call it coming into oneness with God. It doesn't matter, like the song says. There is only one power. And we have many different ways of learning about it and engaging with it. So we have been doing this series based on the roots of spirituality and how we can see that there is this one great power, this one truth that binds all of the world's religions, and that there are ideas from all of the world's religions that have fed into what we call the unity movement. They have all influenced one another throughout history. Last week we started with what we know of our most ancient understandings of spirituality. This week we go a little further into time by looking at the relationship between Judaism and unity. What do we draw from it? What has it taught us? Well, a lot. It is part of the foundation of a religion that would come to be called Christianity after the 4th century. But in the beginning, got to always start at the beginning. In the beginning, Judaism was kind of loose. It was a culmination of different belief systems before it became a codified religion. Tradition says it was started by Abraham and then Isaac and Jacob. But the truth is, they were not really the founders of Judaism. They were the patriarchs, the prophets, those who had the first glimmerings of understandings. It would not be until Moses that Judaism would become what we could call a religion. As you may know, or maybe you don't know, the patriarch of Judaism, Abraham, was the father of Isaac and the grandfather of Jacob. And Jacob took the name, or was given the name, depending on which version of the story you read, Israel, who created the people who would one day be identified as the Israelites. According to the Torah, one of the Hebrew sacred books, God made a covenant with Abraham in about 1835 BCE, so roughly 3,800 years ago. And that covenant said that if you follow what I say and do what I say, you will be the father of many tribes, and all of these tribes will be my chosen people. As I said, Abraham lived about 3,800 years ago. But he had an interesting spiritual evolution himself. He was not born worshiping one God. His father, Tarak, was an idol merchant. That means he made statues of all the various local gods that were worshipped. He didn't have any one particular religion. But when Abraham, as he was known at that time, was a teenager, now imagine this, a teenager doing something like this. He must have gotten angry with his father. The story says he was led by spirit to do this. I think it was teenage hormones. He smashed all of the idols his father had made one afternoon while his father was out, because he had heard this idea of there only being one God, but he didn't know which God that was. Whatever happened, all of the idols were smashed except the biggest one. Now, I can just see this happening, where Abraham's, all of a sudden, he's gotten rid of all the negative energy he had, the anger, whatever it was, and he's standing there holding a hammer, looking at all this destruction in his father's workshop, going, oh my, I'm in trouble. How do I get out of this? And so he puts the hammer in the hands of the big idol, and when Dad comes home, he says, look what he did. It wasn't me. Can you see a teenager doing something like that? Well, somehow he got past that experience, but he began to explore this idea of monotheism. Now, monotheism was not new in the world. Everybody has this idea that this was something new. It was not. There were other religions, the Sumerian religions, Zoroastrian, some of those Egyptian, that had played with this idea of a monotheistic God. And in fact, there really was never anything but a monotheistic God. There were just many different representations of it. So time goes on. Abraham becomes Abraham when he has a moment of enlightenment and becomes the father of Isaac along with his wife, the mother of Isaac. And Isaac is a unique child. For Abraham is told by God that I will give you 10 tests to see if you are worthy. And the 10th test was he was supposed to sacrifice his son as a burnt offering to God. But that's a misunderstanding in ancient scriptures. God was not telling him you have to kill your son. What that meant, and what it has meant down through history, when you sacrifice the firstborn to God, it means that the firstborn becomes a priest or a holy person. It never meant that he was to be killed. Those stories creep in through the years. Child sacrifice was not as common in the ancient world as people think it was. But this is the foundation of the religion that would become Judaism. Of course, there's Jacob, who has 12 sons. Or 12 brothers and sisters. I said that and I thought, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, he dreams of wrestling with an angel and receives a new name at the end of that, Israel. And thus becomes the founder of the 12 tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. But Judaism still was not a religion. And time goes by, and they go to Egypt, and Moses comes to draw them out of Egypt. And what he drew out was 12 peoples who had a relationship through language mostly, but who didn't practice one particular religion. In fact, they weren't even clear on what their religion was. And so here we see the beginning of the religion that we call Judaism, where Moses receives the 10 commandments and 613 laws and codifies the religion, binds these 12 tribes together in one spiritual practice. And as with all religions, it would go through many changes and evolutions throughout its history, but it would always retain its 10 commandments and 613 laws, although the laws would become subject to a lot of interpretation, because they were laws regarding what you can and cannot eat, how long you wear your hair, what kind of clothes you wear. And it always amazes me when I talk to people who say, well, the Bible says this. And I say, but you cut your hair last week. Or you're wearing clothes of 2 different kinds of material. Or I saw you at Red Lobster eating those shellfish. What is religion? What is the source of all of this? Some people say, well, it's the Old Testament, which is the Jewish Bible. And I'm here to tell you today, no, it is not the Jewish Bible. It never was. The Jewish race culture did not have a book they called the Bible. There were many scrolls and many stories that would eventually have some picked and chosen from and put into a book by the Council of Nicaea and called the Old Testament. But the sacred scriptures of the Jewish religion consist of the Tanakh, which includes the Torah, from which we get many of the parts of our Old Testament. and the Mishnah, which are interpretations of the Torah and clarifications. Another one is the Talmud. These are teachings and commentaries on Jewish law. The idea that law can never change was not part of Judaism. They actually had a mechanism to evolve their laws and their understandings and interpretations of the law. Then there was the Midrash, the stories that expand on the incidents in the Bible. This is probably my favorite part of the Judaic scriptures, because it contains all of the backstories of all of the characters from history. Stories like Moses not being a good speaker and his mother stuffing his cheeks with coals when he was a child to help him learn to speak better. And the story of Abraham smashing his father's idols. There's stories or discourses in there answering questions of the law, of debating it, clarifying it, modernizing it. But then we get to probably the most misunderstood, overlooked book of ancient Judaism, and had one of the biggest influences on a Jewish person who would rise years later and give us our teachings that we call Christianity. That book was the original mystical Kabbalah. Now, the Kabbalah today is kind of a New Agey Kabbalah, but in Judaic mysticism, the Kabbalah was the deepest metaphysical teachings that Judaism had at that time. It wasn't for everybody. You had to be over 30 years old to receive the teachings. You had to be well-versed in Judaic law and stories. And only the most educated elders were ever passed this information, including the Rabbini. Now, we've heard of rabbis, but Jesus was called Rabbini. What's the difference? The difference is a rabbi, the word rabbi means a term of respect, a teacher, a master. But a Rabbini is a great teacher, a great master, one who is held in the highest respect. And to be called that, usually you were a teacher of other rabbis, and you had to be married and have children, and you had to have worked in a real career before you became a Rabbini. So these writings, these teachings, contain the deepest metaphysical teachings and ideas of the Jewish people. And it was these ideas that would influence Jesus as a teacher, that he would begin to pass on to his followers. Ideas about being the light of the world. Ideas about a God that was beyond commandments and laws. Ideas of oneness, of grace, of forgiveness, of mercy. These teachings would largely remain hidden, though, through much of history. And they would be lost quite often. You see, there's 4 levels of understanding of Judaic teachings. The first is what's called Peshat, which is literal. We hear it in Christianity today. Somebody will say, I have this Bible. God wrote it. I read it. I believe it. That's it. It's a literal understanding. And it's a beginning point. There's nothing wrong with it. The next level is Remes, which means a beginning of a questioning. Thinking maybe there's something more to this book than just a literal history. Maybe it has something to teach me. And then Drash, the next level of understanding in Hebrew, is the homiletics, the metaphysical understanding. I love what Maimonides said, an ancient scholar. He wrote, only a fool would confuse the tale with the message. We have the tale, but what is the message that the tale teaches? And finally, the highest level of understanding, Sod, which means the esoteric. It deals with the big picture. What is creation? What is my place in it? What am I really? Am I just a worm upon the earth at the whim of a God out there somewhere? Born in sin, wallowing in sin, probably going to burn in hell? Or am I something else? Am I a soul that is evolving to a higher and higher spiritual relation and understanding? This is what Charles recognized when he began to study the world's religions, that there were deep teachings in all of the world's religions that were true for us today, and that we are reaching that point in our evolution where we're moving beyond strict dogmatic religion to evolutionary spirituality, where we take the teachings of all the prophets and all of the messiahs and teachers of all of the religions, and we say, wait a minute, I am more than this. We are more than this. We are meant to grow and evolve. We are meant to have life and have it what? Very good. Jesus' mission statement. You may have life and have it abundantly. So how does this relate to unity? Unity was a movement along with several other, what we now call New Thought, that said we need to move beyond law-based religion and move to a place of path-based religion. A religion that points the way, but we walk the path. The laws that are unchanging are the laws of mind action. That's the basis of the whole Judaic experience, the law of mind action. If you look at the Old Testament, the way we have it, it tells the story of the rise and fall of the Israelites, from freedom to slavery, from bondage to overcoming to conquest. And it's all about the law of mind action. When we are aligned with Spirit, we prosper, we thrive. And when we get out of alignment, we don't. That's what happened in their history. They were in alignment and out of alignment. They were kingdoms. They fell. They were conquered. They were driven into captivity. And then they gained their freedoms back. It's the law of flow, of being in that flow of life. But Jesus came along and said, this is what we have done, but it's not what we must continue doing. Jesus uplifted the law, condensed it, simplified it to one of only one power, love. Love. In Mark 12:28, there's a story about Jesus conversing probably with a bunch of rabbis. It doesn't make clear who it was. I imagine there were some Pharisees among them. And they were debating the laws of the Judaic tradition, which is common. That's still practiced today in Judaism. It's part of their spiritual path. Looking at these, debating them, looking at them from all different viewpoints. And one of the teachers of the law came and heard all the debating going on, and he realized that Jesus was giving some good answers. And so he raised his hand, I guess, and said, of all of the commandments, teacher, which one is the most important? I'm going to put it in more modern language. The most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And there's a second one. Love your neighbor as yourself. There are no commandments greater than these. The man replied, well said, teacher. You are right in saying that God is one and there is no other but him. To love him with all of your heart and with all of your understanding and with all of your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices. That last part is the most important part in that story because it represents a massive shift in the consciousness of Jesus' day, a shift that really would usher in the next level of spiritual evolution for Western people. Listen to it again. Well said. You are right in saying that God is one and there is no other but him. To love him with all of your heart, with all of your understanding, with all of your strength. Now, the word love, translated out of the original Hebrew, was a little bit of a mistranslation in that case, but it was used because there was no good word to translate. What it kind of means to love God means to channel God, if you will, to be God in action, to be one with that energy. So what Jesus was saying here is, be God expressing. Be God in action. And then, love your neighbor as yourself. God is your soul, your heart, your mind, your strength. And when you realize that, you can see it in your neighbor. This was a radical teaching 2,000 years ago. A huge diversion from traditional Judaic law. Traditional Judaic law said that you couldn't love your neighbor unless they were part of your tribe. Or even if they were part of your tribe and they had done something wrong to you, you couldn't love them until they came specifically and asked for forgiveness. And Jesus said, no, love everybody anyway. Love everybody, even those guys on the other side that are not of our religion. Love your neighbor as yourself, which was another radical teaching. Love yourself. Why not? You are God expressing. If you don't love yourself, you are not loving God. If you don't love yourself, you cannot love your neighbor, because we are all one. It is not possible to hate one part of creation and not hate all of it. And then he said something really radical. And this is probably what got Jesus in so much trouble. He said, love your neighbor as yourself is more important than all of the burnt offerings and sacrifices. Burnt offerings and sacrifices was how the temple made its money. And here is one of the temple elders saying, oh, I get it. God is not in the temple. God is everywhere. It's often said that one of the great things that Jesus did, and Jesus was Jewish, remember. He said, or what he did is, he took God out of the temple and gave God back to the people. Prior to that, only the high priest could go into the inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, and commune with God. And Jesus says, no, all of you can commune with God because God is within you and all around you. And you do not need to make burnt offerings and sacrifices. Radical teaching for the day. That would, the way that man replied to Jesus would have been considered blasphemy in his day. So here we have a Jewish Rabbani who moved Judaism from a dominator religion to a more cooperative and collaborative religion. One where we cooperate with God. We use the creative energies that God gave us to create a world that truly does work for all, that truly does empower us and others to have a life and have it abundantly. Where God is not in a temple or a church, but all around, in, and through creation. The light that God is, we call the Christ in you, your hope of glory. And it's in every single human being. Sadly, it would not be long before the religion that identified Jesus as its creator would spring up. And all of that power would be taken away again by emperors and kings and others who wanted to control their people. They threw out the idea of divine kinship and creative ability and replaced it with the original temple hierarchy, just with different titles. Now, please understand, I am not putting down early Christianity or any Christianity. That's part of the path that we have gone on. It's getting right back to the lessons of the Old Testament where the Jewish kingdoms rise and fall when we're in cooperation and alignment. It's the natural evolution of understanding. And every time it happens, truth re-emerges. 2,000 years ago, truth re-emerged with the teachings of Jesus. For us, it's new thought, which includes unity. Essentially, we are at the Drosh and Sod level of understanding. That place where we know that there's a deep, deep teaching in all of these stories and all of these traditions. And we feel that mystical connection and that metaphysical understanding. And we become aware of our place in it, because it is what every great teacher of every religion has said. We are part of creation. We are part of evolution, and we are evolving as well. In Unity, we took all of these ideas and we brought them into these times, more modern languages. This is what our classes are all about. Charles Fillmore said, Unity is the continuation of the great educational movement inaugurated by Jesus the Christ. And we are continuing it. We have our core Unity classes, such as Michelle's. Are you here, Michelle? Yes, right there. Michelle's class, the history of unity and new thought. We have classes on prayer and spirituality. And because we are practical spirituality, we have classes that provide the tools that we can use to make that growth easier, like Roland's Enneagram class. Tools that we can use to learn how to better hear and relate to one another. We are meant to grow and evolve. We are meant to not forget or denigrate our past histories, but to incorporate them into our understanding, to see them as the foundation of where we build today. From Judaism, we draw most of our teachings in metaphysics, as well as our understanding of evolution. As a movement and as individuals, we do not remain stagnant. We are not stuck in dogma or ritual. And like Jesus taught, our foundation is love. But not merely the love of or for a creator that is blind, that says, oh, well, I love God up there somewhere. The love that says, I am one with God, and so are you. Our foundation is not the belief in somebody who lived 2,000 years ago and still demands that we love him, but the belief in a great teacher who came on the scene 2,000 years ago and said, grow, become more than you have been, follow my teachings, do as I have done. That love of God that was expressed by all of the great teachers, that was modeled by Jesus, it flows through all of us, flows through all of creation, all life, one another, and the universe itself. It calls to us. This is the great teaching of Judaism and all the other world's religions, that beyond all of the stuff, all of the stories, all of the rituals, all of the dogmas, all of the creeds, the energy of love calls us to grow, calls us to recognize our unity with one another, with God, and with God's creation. This is the season of Lent. And I'm going to leave you with something that Charles Fillmore wrote in Keep a True Lent. He wrote, one good definition of love is that feeling that excites desire for the welfare of its objects. If all people would recognize love as embodying this ideal, love all to the degree that God has poured out divine life, substance, and intelligence equally with everyone in a universal scheme, they would find it the solution to every problem of life. Our greatest good comes from the welfare of all. So, yeah, I heard an amen. I'll say it again. Our greatest good comes from the welfare of all. And we can see that and do that when we look at one another as one. So as we move further through this series and through this Lenten season, remember, we are all one with God, one as God, and God in action. Namaste. Thank you.
is different, distances between, and fixing it is not as simple as it seems. But there is understanding if you just believe. Together we will all join hearts in unity. Love will help you to be brave, rushing in just like the waves. You don't have to be afraid when we all believe. You and I are one, and wherever we're from, we all shine under the same sun. Love could never be wrong, and it helps us be strong as we face the unknown. You can call me brother, come to me in need, and I know that you'll be there if ever it were me. Love will cross an ocean deeper than the sea. It's possible we'll make impossibilities. Love will help you to be brave, rushing in just like the waves. You don't have to be afraid when we all believe. You and I are one, and wherever we're from, we all shine under the same sun. Love could never be wrong, and it helps us be strong as we face the unknown. Like a shadow, and now that the sun's going down, love still follows us around. I hope it always will. It's a matter of faith. Just imagine a place where hate has been erased. It's not hard if you try. You and I are one, and wherever we're from, we all shine under the same sun. Love could never be wrong, and it helps us be strong as we face the unknown. You and I are one, and wherever we're from, we all shine under the same sun, and it helps us be strong as we face the unknown.
Thanks so much, Bill. That was great. Let's sing our kids in.